It's officially started.
Are we doing that?
Oh, what?
Lights, cameras, fractions.
All right, good. So let's have it really quiet. Really try to focus big time right now, because I want to make sure I have enough time for you guys to work on the homework a little bit, right? So that we can iron out all the kinks. So we're going to talk about slope. We're moving back. Actually, let me just preface before I say this. So we've just done the inequality. I'm sorry, Dan and Jaden. I'm going to have to move you guys if you keep doing this. This is my video right now, guys. This is my video, right? What was I talking about? Finding the slope of the two. We just finished the inequalities, the compound inequalities. We're done with it. That's all we needed to do. Okay. We just had to get through it. It is useful in terms of your brain understanding and and or. It's useful in understanding logic because it's logic. That's really all it is. And understanding concepts of how to graph an inequality and so forth. But it's not something I'm going to put a lot of focus on. You know, we did it and it's good enough. You guys, it seemed to me like you have a good understanding of it. So that was your test on inequalities today, because you guys did really well. Okay? So I'm not going to worry about that anymore. But finding the slope between 2 points, this will definitely be on a test. This is a really important concept. You already know how to tell me what the point is from, you know how to graph a slope. Am I right?
Yeah.
Right? If I gave you something like this, and what formula is this again?
Slope intercept. Yeah.
Why is it called slope intercept? Yes.
Because there's a y-intercept, and then you find the...
So this is your slope, right? That's your slope, and that's your y-intercept, right?
Yeah.
So you know it's going to be slope-intercept. It's awesome. It's really good to know that kind of information, to know what it's called. Now, if I gave you this equation, y is equal to 1/2 x plus 3, and I asked you to graph it, what would be the first thing I'd do?
Can I come up with a graphic?
No, just tell me, because I've got this as it's a video. So, Sienna.
You would go up. Okay, so on the y-axis, from
Yep.
the origin, you would go up 3 points.
Up 3 points, and I put a dot, right? And what would I do now? I want to know, I'm going to use my slope, right, to get to my next point. So keep going.
Oh, okay, so then, the fraction is rise over run. So
Right.
you would rise up 1 because that's the numerator, and
Right.
then you would run over 2 because that's,
Right. Rise up 1, run 2,
and then you put a dot.
put a
And
dot,
Then you
right?
can draw a
You
line.
got a line.
Right? And I have a line now that I can draw. I can always draw a line through 2 points, right? And that line is a straight line, and that line has a slope. Like when you think about it, like a ski slope, how would you determine what is the slope of a ski slope? Well, you have to use this concept of rise over run. You have to use that concept of rise over run. There's no other way to describe a slope. You rise this much and you run this much, right? If it's a gradual, a green, isn't green like the easy,
Yeah.
right? It's rise 1. So yeah, so a green on a ski slope is very easy, right? So it's like, what would be give me an example what you think the slope would be. You rise 1 foot and run like
50 feet.
50 feet, right? And then you're down there and you're just sort of slowly moving, right? Right? But what if it was a black diamond? Give me an example of what you think the slope might be.
Or double black.
So it might be like 50 feet by...
Well, it also depends
Well,
on
what's
whether
the
it's a
rise
rise.
over run? You got to tell me a rise.
1, 1.
Or, well, actually, it would be a negative, right? That's a good point. It would be a negative slope, right? But go ahead.
So it would be very slow. Like 1, 1.
So,
Or negative,
so rise maybe 20 and run 1.
no.
Yeah, something like that.
Right.
I guess that might be more like a double
Or
line.
fall 20 and run 1 or something. Yeah, right. So it's really helpful to keep in your mind that slope is rise over run. Okay. So now,
That's almost fair.
if I wanted to,
Exactly.
if I gave you this line on a graph, guys, if I gave you this line on a graph, and I said, okay, what is the slope? Well, it would be pretty easy to tell. Well, let's see, I rose 1, and I ran 1, 2, that's 2. So it's 1/2. Don't you agree with me? It's pretty easy to do that, right? Now, if I just gave you 2 points and not a graph, then you have an option. You could graph it and then plot the 2 points and then count the rise and then count the run. Does that make sense? You could do that. But it's a lot of work. Like on the homework tonight, I didn't give you a whole heck of a lot of space between the problems, right? You would be very busy drawing graphs of all these things, right? And there's got to be a simpler way. And algebra is all about shortcuts, right? All about shortcuts. And so we have to learn a method to calculate the slope between 2 points without having to bother graphing. Does that make sense? So this is the slope formula. This is part of the slope formula. I mean, this is the slope formula, but it's written in different ways, and I'm going to explain it to you. So it says slope formula is the change. It says delta. That, you guys, are you familiar with that triangle y over triangle x?
Yeah.
Triangle is the Greek term for delta. I mean, it's the symbol for delta. But you don't have to remember delta. Just remember this. It means change. The change in. Right? Or it means change, right? The change of the y's over the change of the x's. Now, if I said, what does change mean now? Is that add, subtract, multiply, or divide? If I said, if it was 20 degrees this morning when I woke up, and now it's 40 degrees, what's the change? The change is 20 degrees. How'd you get that?
Because
You did 40 minus. You did 40 minus 20.
Yes.
Am I right?
yes.
So change means subtract. Change means subtract. That's really important. It seems like simple, and it is simple,
What
but
if it goes down?
it's amazing how fast people forget this. Change means subtract. So what this really means then is subtract the y's over subtract the x's. All right? Now, a more complete formula that you will often see in textbooks is this. I'll just write it right here. M is equal to y sub 2 minus y sub 1 over x sub 2 minus x sub 1. That is the same thing as this. Identical. Change in y just says subtract the y. Change in x just says subtract the x's. This is subtracting the 2 y's. And this is subtracting the 2 x's. Right? And you'll see what I mean in a second. Some of you will prefer this formula. I prefer this one, personally. But some of you will prefer this one. I prefer this one because it's so simple.
Yeah.
I can remember it. You know, slope is change in y over the change in x. So easy. It's not y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. And I think, wait a minute, could it be y1 minus y2? Yes, it could.
It's M
It could.
triangle Y.
As long as it's x1 minus x2. Right? So, so let's say I gave you 2 points. Let's say I gave you 4, 8 and 2, 1. And I asked you to tell me the slope. Well, I'm going to use my formula. I'm going to use this, basically. I mean, it's basic. Well, I'll use this first, and then I'll show you that. Well, let's use this first. Well, this is, you get to choose which one is y1 and x1, y1, and which one is x2, y2. It doesn't have to be the first one. It could be the second one. I personally like to start with, so if you're going to do y2 minus y1, I'm going to make the bigger ones y2. Does that make sense? x2 doesn't really matter. I'm going to make that x2 and y2. and I'm gonna make this x1 and y1. It would have been fine if I'd made this x1 and y1, it's just that I would have been dealing with negatives, right? And people make mistakes when you do negatives. So I just recommend, was that on the board? Yeah. All right, I recommend that you try to keep things as positive as you can. All right, so here we go. M is equal to, it says y2. I'm starting with this. This is what I recommend. Put a box around the point you're starting with. Is that clear? That will help you immensely. Immensely. The first thing I write in the formula is always from the thing that's in the box, okay? Now, common mistake. People will do this for, what's wrong with that?
Oh,
Yes.
4 is x2. Well, you're starting above the
Yeah,
line,
my
so it
y's
has to
are
be
upstairs,
y2.
not my x's. So it's 8. And then the formula says minus. However, change in y means minus, right? So immediately I put 8 minus. And then I look at my y, my other y, it's 1. All over my x, I always start with the 1 in the box. 4 minus, because change means minus. 1, 2, yes. Right? And so now I get 7 halves, right? And that's my slope.
Oh, cool.
And people are going to say, no, that's 1 and, it's 2 and, it's 3 and 1/2, right?
That's
Three.
your mouth hole. You can't grab that.
Yeah, exactly.
Three.
Slow is friction.
We're talking slope. We are talking slope. Slope is not measured in, guys. Slope is not measured in mixed numbers. Slope is measured in fractions, rise over run. So keep it as rise over run. What if I had come out with 14/4? That is still a slope, but it's not simplified. I expect you to simplify it to 7 halves. Does that make sense? Simplify your slope, right? If I get 4 halves, then it would be 2. Right? Whatever.
Where's your starting point? Where do you start from?
So your starting point is put a box around one of the 2 sets.
Oh, so you can, either one is correct. You can do either one.
You can do either one. Makes no difference. Well, the only difference is that if you chose, let's just do this. Let's do this one, and let's do it the reverse. That was pretty easy, don't you agree with me?
Yeah.
So now let's do it in reverse. Let's say I make this y2, x2, y2, and this x1, y1. All right. So now we got this. Everybody, look at this. Well, this one was the first one we did. Now I'm gonna do it this way. M is equal to y2, 1, right?
Okay.
Minus 8.
Oh, okay.
Do you see the difference?
Yeah.
And then 2 minus 4. Now look what I have. I have -7 over -2. And if you leave it like that, you will get a point taken off on the exam. Why?
Positive.
Because
it's positive.
negative divided by negative is a positive. So it is 7 halves. I think personally it's easier when you can keep it positive, keep it positive. Yes, John?
Okay, so will you always have 2 points like that?
Yes.
And if you make the first one y1 and then x1, does the next one have to be y1 and then x1 too?
Say that one more time. Say it one more time.
No, so
If
if
this
4, 8, is x1 and
y1
y1, the next one doesn't
has
have
to be
x2,
x2 and y2.
It can't be y2 and x2.
No, because the point is x comma y. X comma y.
Yeah.
But you said it could be y1 and then x1. You said you could choose.
Oh yeah, you cannot have x1 comma y2. If this is an x1, this is a y1. If this is an x2, this is a y2.
Yeah,
Does
but
that make
if you
sense?
have y1
No,
and
you could choose whichever one. Yeah, you can.
You can choose whichever one to start with to make whichever point you want to be y2
but it
and
always has
x2.
to be xy.
But the x, if I chose this one to be y2, then this is x2. If I chose this one to be y2, then this is x2.
You can say it doesn't
Right.
matter.
It doesn't matter which one you start with, right? So I don't even go with this. I never, ever, ever, ever use this. It's harder. It really is harder. People don't believe me, but that is so much harder than this. So now let's do it this way, okay? Let's not worry about this y1 and y2 and x2 and x1, you know what I mean? Don't worry about it. You just keep it simple. It's just subtract the y's, right? Subtract the y's over subtract the x's. That's so simple. So what if I gave you this? 9, comma, 2, and 4, comma, 6. Okay? It really doesn't matter which one I make my, start with first. So I'm going to, what I do doesn't matter. I learned this a long time ago. I just take the bigger y. That's a 2, that's a 6. I put my box around the bigger y. Doesn't matter, makes no difference. It's just that I'm more likely to have a positive, to work with positives if I choose the bigger number. Does that make sense?
Good day.
All right, so now I put a box around it, and all it says is I subtract the y's. But I have to start with this y. So m is equal to 6 minus, because change means minus, 2. All over 4, I got to start with the one in the box, minus 9. So that gives me 4 over negative 5, right?
Yep.
So negative 4/5. Right? Easy. Yes? Easy?
Yes.
All right. Can I erase?
Yeah. Garrett, can we have our homework now?
Nope. All right. Now, where it gets where it gets complicated is when where it gets complicated is when I give you things like this. Negative 4, comma, negative 7,
Need time for our homework.
and 2, comma, negative
Oh.
5. Why does this suddenly make it complicated?
Because there's negatives.
There's negative numbers, right? So which one am I going to put a box around? Which one's bigger y? I'm going to do this one. It doesn't matter. It makes no difference. It's fine either way. But I just have this method that I always do, and it always works, so I do it. So m is subtract the y's. I start in the box. I have to write negative 5, and then I put a minus because it means change.
Minus negative 7.
And then this is a negative 7. And so this is what people do. They say, oh, well, there's already a minus. I don't have to write negative. It's negative 7, right? It's negative 5 minus negative 7, which means it's a plus 7. All over. Guys, there's a video. Come on. Over 2 in the box. I have to start in the box. Minus. And now I look at this. It's a negative 4. So it becomes a plus 4. So 7 minus 5 is 2. And 2 plus 4 is 6. Am I done?
No, 1/3.
Which is 1/3.
1/3.
And that is my slope. M is 1/3.
I called it.
Fist to 5.
4.5. As you.
Okay, awesome.
Makes sense, Dan. Gary, are we
All right,
going?
I'm going to go ahead and stop this.